Imagine receiving a final message, not a paragraph, not a long explanation, not even an apology, just one sentence. "I don't think this is working anymore." That sentence would hurt. You'd probably stare at your screen, feel your chest tighten, read it 10 times, maybe cry, maybe get angry, but eventually your mind would begin to accept reality, because pain has a shape. Pain has boundaries. Pain has an ending. Now imagine something else. Imagine someone becoming quieter, replies getting shorter, energy changing, conversations becoming slower, until one day, nothing, no message, no explanation, no goodbye, no visible ending, just silence. At first you stay calm. You tell yourself they're busy. People have lives. Maybe they forgot. Maybe something happened. You wait. Then another day passes, and another. You type messages, delete them, type again. You open their profile, check their activity, look for clues, and suddenly your entire emotional world begins revolving around one invisible question. What happened? And this is the part nobody talks about. Ghosting doesn't destroy you because someone left. Ghosting destroys you because your brain never receives permission to stop searching. Your brain is obsessed with completion. You probably never noticed this. But your entire life operates through endings. Movies end, books end, conversations end, even arguments end. Your mind expects closure because closure creates order. Without endings, reality becomes chaos. This is why unfinished things stay in your head. Think about that show you stopped watching halfway. You still remember it. Think about unfinished work. You remember it. Think about someone who disappeared. You remember them, not because they mattered more, because they remained incomplete. Psychologists call this a discovery that showed something strange about human memory. People remember unfinished experiences far more intensely than completed ones. Completed stories relax the brain. Incomplete stories activate the brain. Your mind literally continues allocating energy to unresolved situations. Now imagine what happens when this mechanism enters relationships. Ghosting becomes psychological torture because there's no event to process, no final conversation, no official ending, just emptiness. And your brain interprets emptiness as continue searching. That's why you replay conversations. That's why random memories appear while showering. That's why months later something reminds you of them. And suddenly your chest feels heavy again. Your mind isn't trying to suffer. Your mind is trying to complete the story. But there's a problem. There may not be a story left to complete, and that realization becomes terrifying because suddenly you understand you may be searching for an answer that never existed. This sounds impossible, but for most people, rejection hurts less than uncertainty. Imagine someone looks at you and says, "I don't see a future with you." That would hurt deeply, but eventually your brain starts adjusting. Reality becomes visible. Now compare that to silence. Silence has no shape. Silence leaves space. And your mind hates empty space, because empty space becomes imagination. Your brain starts building stories. Maybe they lost feelings. Maybe they're afraid. Maybe they miss me. Maybe they need time. Maybe they'll come back. And every scenario feels possible. That's what makes ghosting dangerous. Not pain. Hope. Hope becomes the prison, because certainty closes doors. Hope leaves them slightly open, and people can stay trapped in slightly open doors for years. Not because they're weak, because human beings are designed to seek patterns, to search, to complete, to understand. That's why ghosting feels heavier than heartbreak. Heartbreak gives you pain. Ghosting gives you endless possibilities. And endless possibilities never let your nervous system rest. You wake up, check your phone, nothing. You feel disappointed, but secretly relieved, because maybe tomorrow, then tomorrow comes, still nothing. And somehow, that hurts more, because every silent day restarts the cycle. This next part is uncomfortable, because most people don't realize they stop missing the person and start missing the possibility. Your brain becomes addicted to uncertainty. Think about casinos. Slot machines don't work because people always win. They work because people sometimes win. Random rewards create stronger attachment. Ghosting creates the same emotional pattern. You check, nothing. You wait, nothing. Then suddenly, they view your story. Your heart races. Maybe that means something. They like your post. Your hope returns. You receive one random notification, and your nervous system explodes with possibility. Your brain starts saying, maybe they still care. Maybe they're coming back. Maybe, and that word, maybe, becomes emotional poison, because maybe keeps people emotionally unavailable to reality. Maybe prevents healing, maybe turns absence into hope. You start creating conversations that never happened, imagining apologies, imagining reunions, imagining explanations, and without realizing, you become attached to a future version of someone, instead of accepting the person who already left. And this is where the deepest pain appears, because eventually you realize you don't even know what you're waiting for anymore. Not them, not love, not even reconciliation. You're waiting for certainty. You're waiting for the moment your brain finally says, the story is over. But what if nobody comes to say that? What if the ending is the silence itself? After enough silence, something changes. At first, you search for answers outside yourself. Maybe they're busy. Maybe something happened. Maybe they need space. But eventually, your brain gets tired of uncertainty, and when uncertainty lasts too long, the mind creates certainty, even if that certainty hurts. So the question changes from, why did they leave? To, what's wrong with me? That's the moment ghosting becomes dangerous, because now their absence becomes your identity. You begin reopening old conversations, reading messages differently, looking for mistakes. You remember moments you didn't think mattered. That joke, that delayed reply, that disagreement, that one day you acted distant. And suddenly, your mind builds a courtroom. You become the suspect, the prosecutor, and the judge. You sentence yourself. Maybe I cared too much. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I became boring. Maybe nobody stays. And slowly, their silence starts becoming evidence against your worth. But here's the tragedy. Human beings blame themselves because self-blame feels safer than randomness, because if it was your fault, you believe you can fix it. But if people leave for reasons outside your control, that feels terrifying. So your mind chooses guilt, because guilt creates the illusion of control. But silence is not proof. Someone disappearing quietly does not automatically mean you lacked something. Sometimes, it only means they lacked the courage to communicate. Most people secretly imagine the same thing. Months later, they return, you meet, they explain, you finally understand, you feel peace, you walk away healed. It feels perfect, like movies. But reality rarely works that way, because closure sounds powerful. Until it arrives, sometimes people explain themselves, and somehow, it still doesn't help. Because explanations don't erase emotions. Imagine they say, I got scared. Would your pain disappear? Imagine they say, I lost feelings. Would your memories disappear? No. Because closure isn't knowledge. Closure is emotional acceptance, and people often confuse the two. You think you need answers, but many times you need permission. Permission to stop searching, permission to stop hoping, permission to stop reopening a door that nobody else is opening. This part happens quietly. One day, you realize something. You aren't moving forward. You're paused. You start delaying life. not fully meeting new people, not fully investing emotionally, not fully healing, because somewhere, a small part of your mind still says, "What if they come back?" And suddenly, waiting becomes comfort, because hope feels safer than acceptance. Acceptance feels final, waiting feels alive, but there's a hidden cost. Waiting steals time. Waiting keeps your identity attached to someone who already stopped participating in your story. You begin measuring your value by someone else's silence, and slowly, life becomes smaller, not because they took your future, because waiting convinced you not to build one. This realization changes everything. You wake up one day, and something feels different. You stop trying to decode. You stop trying to understand. And suddenly, a thought appears. What if silence was never missing information? What if silence was information? Because communication isn't only words. Distance communicates. Absence communicates. Effort communicates. Disappearing communicates. Not all endings arrive with speeches. Some arrive quietly. And maybe the answer was never hidden. Maybe you simply refused to accept it. That doesn't mean they were evil. It doesn't mean you weren't enough. It means reality happened, and reality doesn't always explain itself. Healing doesn't happen dramatically. There's no music, no perfect day, no final text. It happens quietly. One morning, you don't check. One evening, you don't reread. One week, you realize their name crossed your mind less. Then one day, you remember, and instead of pain, there's space. You realize something powerful. You survived without answers. You stopped negotiating with silence. You stopped asking, "Why wasn't I enough?" and started asking, "Why did I believe someone else's decision defined me?" That question changes everything, because healing isn't forgetting. Healing is remembering without needing something back. And here's the final truth. The answer you wanted may never come. No explanation, no apology, no message, nothing. And strangely, that's okay, because closure was never hidden in their reply. Closure was hidden inside your decision to stop reopening the same wound, your decision to stop turning silence into hope. Your decision to stop believing love needs confusion. Maybe closure isn't understanding why they left. Maybe closure is realizing you deserved enough respect to not be left guessing. And maybe the hardest lesson of all is this. People do not always leave with explanations. Sometimes they leave with silence. And healing begins the moment you stop treating silence like a mystery, because unanswered questions feel powerful. Until one day, you realize the answer you were waiting for was already the ending. If this video changed how you think about ghosting, attachment, and human psychology, subscribe, because sometimes the strongest prison isn't another person. It's the story your mind refuses to finish. And sometimes freedom begins the moment you stop waiting for the final message.